Hello and welcome to the Hey Boomer Show, the show for those of us who believe that we are never too old to set another goal or dream a new dream. So who starts a podcast at 66? Isn't that the time you're supposed to be slowing down and enjoying the time you have left? Well, guess what? I met a lot of podcasters over 60 at the Podcast Movement Convention, and starting Hey Boomer at 66 has given me a renewed sense of purpose and meaning in my life. I love being able to bring inspiration and encouragement to people in the third act of life. And what about Jane Fonda? She's 85, still making movies, still involved as an activist in the environmental movement. And I have a friend who still runs his own business at 75. His work does not only give him a sense of purpose, it also helps him feel meaningful to his family and friends by being able to help them. So we are also never too old to find purpose and meaning in our third act of life. And that is what we're going to talk about today. What it means to find purpose and meaning. How important it is to our health and our well-being, and why belonging to something also enhances our well-being. And we're going to talk about how our mindsets and the things that we tell ourselves can give us an extraordinary life, or they can drag us down and make us feel old. So take a moment now to text a friend, invite them to join the live show, or share it with them later where they can listen to it on YouTube or find us on any of the podcast apps. My guest today is Erik Seversen, and I'm looking forward to introducing you to him. But first, I want to remind you to sign up for the new Boomer Banter. So thinking about the banter, we're going to talk about role models. So we'll talk about things like, who are some of your role models? Are there role models for our kids and grandkids today? And who are they? And do you see yourself as a role model? And what does that mean to you? So those are the kinds of questions that we will dig into and discuss and unpack when we meet together in the Boomer Banter. And I am opening Banter 2. It's going to meet on the third Tuesday of every month. And it will meet at 12 o'clock Eastern time. So wherever you happen to be located, you can join us in your own time zone. It is a membership group. It's only $12 a month to be a part of this group. And it's a place where you're going to build lasting friendships and gain knowledge and wisdom and feel supported by the community that builds the Boomer Banter. If you'd like to become a member of our new Banter 2, go to buymeacoffee.com/heyboomer0413, and you can sign up there. So I hope to see you on October the 17th to join the Boomer Banter. Okay, so let me bring Erik on and do a brief introduction. Hi, Erik.
Hi, Wendy. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and I'm so glad to have you on today to inspire us and enlighten us.
Very happy to be here. What you're doing is absolutely amazing, and I'm excited.
Thank you. So Erik has lived an extraordinary life, but it did not start out that way. He was born in Tacoma, Washington, where he was an average student and an avid ice hockey player. He eventually realized the value of education and received a master's in anthropology. Erik has traveled to all 50 states and over 90 countries. He's a mountain climber and has summited the highest peak on 4 continents. He has lived with a remote Indian tribe deep in the Amazon. And all of these experiences have given him a unique perspective on some of the big life questions, as well as some of the smaller everyday events in our lives. In 2018, Erik published his first book, Ordinary to Extraordinary, and he's gone on to facilitate the development of several other inspiring books, The Successful Mind, the successful body, and the successful spirit. Erik's desire is to inspire, motivate, and produce positive changes in individuals and in corporations. And he has a son that's just started college, so another adventure for him. So, Erik, tell us a bit about the journey that brought you to this place of providing inspiration and motivation to people and companies.
Okay, thank you, Wendy, for the great introduction. And it's really an accident how I got to where I am now. One thing early on is I realized that people scoffed at some ideas I had really young, even like, how far can I ride my little tiny bike up the neighborhood type thing. And I realized that I could do those things. I kept pushing those boundaries. And you said I was an avid ice hockey player up in Washington. Most people who played ice hockey started around 6 years old, 5 years old often. I didn't decide to play ice hockey until I was 13. And
Oh,
so I had to teach myself how to, I just fell in love with the idea of ice hockey and just couldn't think of anything else. So I had to teach myself how to skate. And when I got on a team, I made a team after about a year of teaching myself how to skate, and
wow.
ended up making it to the junior B level, being the worst player on the team for the first year. But keep on fighting and fighting and fighting because I absolutely loved it, and I knew I could do it. And in the end, became a relatively good member of our team. And so that's one of the things that I love, is that an individual idea could turn into something that becomes part of a community. And I think that's kind of like life a little bit. The accident of how I got to where I am, I published my first book, like you said, in 2018, just for fun. And these are all true first person narratives about my life. But I sent it to somebody with some advice about publishing. And he says, Erik, you and all your friends are going to love this. And I said, that's not a compliment, is it? He said, no, it's all about you. And I'm like I'm thinking to myself, yeah, but they're narratives about my life. But he basically said, nobody's going to be interested other than you and a few of your friends about details of your life. So I spent a year reworking that book through the lens of Emily Esfahani Smith's book, The Power of Meaning. And so I grouped these true narratives into how did I feel a sense of purpose by this event that was bigger than myself? How did I feel a sense of belonging by living with the Wayana Indians in South America? How did I feel a transcendental moment that changed my life when I saw the Aurora Borealis? And then in the end, storytelling and getting my book out. And those are her four pillars of meaning. And you kind of mentioned them a little bit. Belonging, purpose, storytelling, and transcendence, according to Emily Esfahani Smith, are the pillars of meaning, and happiness is a byproduct. So I reworked this book throughout a year and published it, and it actually took off, and it led to some really good speaking opportunities, so much so that in 2020 in January, I left a position doing international business development to speak full time, and that went great for 2 months. March 2020, things changed a little bit.
Pandemic,
Yep.
hello.
And every cent I had lined up, my wife wasn't working at the time. I didn't have a
Oh,
cent lined up
no.
for 2020, and I'd already left my job and to speak. And so my second book, which was a continuation of that, and that book's called Explore, was 99% done, sitting on a shelf for 2 years. And so I quickly finished that up, got it out there, and it did well too. And then that led into a bunch of co-authored book projects. But so basically, it was an accident of me telling my story just for fun, getting it out there, and then having a few people who read it wanted to hear more. So they started to invite me to speak. And I've always been a positive person, I think. And so once I spoke to crowds I wanted two things. I wanted something practical, a tool they could use that day. And I wanted to be motivational. So I wanted something, kind of on the motivational realm, but also something on the practical realm. And that just led to more and more. And I kind of learned as I went a little bit of what is motivation, what is productivity, what is performance, high performance, things like that. And it just kind of snowballed from there. And it's been a wonderful journey, Wendy. I've really loved it. And I'm thankful for where I am right now.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it's been an amazing journey. And you mentioned several things that I'd like to explore a little bit more, like your time with the Indian tribe in the Amazon.
Hmm.
And you talked about feeling a sense of belonging. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it was. So I studied anthropology as an undergraduate at UCLA. And during that, I was part of an honors program that actually did research, and I got funding to go to South America. I went in through French Guiana and spent time in French Guiana, Suriname, and Brazil, right on those borders. And I lived with that time a group called the Aluku, which is a maroon community, basically African descendants who live in the forest as a tribe in South America still. They came over on slave ships, and as soon as the ship hit ground, they revolted and literally went into the forest and have been living in the forest since then.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
so that was wonderful. And then with the Aluku, sometimes on hunting trips, I would see we occasioned Indians in the forest. So I went to University of Virginia for grad school, and I wanted to go deeper in the forest and explore how the Wayana is the tribe name, how they lived and what we can learn from them. And so later at University of Virginia, I got funding from the Raven Society, which is kind of exciting, to go down and live with the Wayana. And with the Wayana, I learned that community is really important. They're hunters and gatherers with some small scale agriculture. So if you don't hunt successfully on a day, you might not eat. However, really learn to appreciate that team effort, that team way of living, that they're able to be released of the individual anxiety of fear by spreading it out as a community. And so that's one of the biggest takeaways I got from living with them. And it was just there were tons of wonderful things I learned from them, but that was the one that I think stuck the most. And part of their society is built on these untalked about and almost unconscious exchange patterns that helped keep that community a very tight knit organization.
Mm. So, loneliness is an epidemic with older people. And trying to find a sense of belonging in a community like the United States, where we are all rushing around in a hurry and we don't live as extended families anymore. I mean, what are you seeing in your experience now that can help fix that?
Yeah, and I gave my first TEDx talk a few weeks ago, and I talked about what I learned from the Wayana, and one of the things I said was the Wayana have to rely on community for survival. We don't. We've got refrigerators and packaged food. I could live in my house and have food delivered to me and not speak to anybody. However, we have to ask ourselves, is that healthy? Is that the best way for me to live? And I think sadly, we have become partially pandemic, but even aside from that, we've become really comfortable being alone. I was public speaking 100% before COVID-19, and then I went into producing books. I love producing books. Absolutely love it. I think I make a huge impact doing it. However, I became so comfortable hiding behind my computer and creating
Mm.
these books and knowing that I'm still effectively communicating with people. But the fact is, the high fives, hugs, and the really, really strong connection by speaking in public, I think is also really important. And it's something that I should continue doing, even though I've become more comfortable being alone behind my computer. And so I'm right now in this stage post pandemic of forcing myself to get out of my chair to make these connections again. And so I've just lined up last week 2 speaking engagements for, I think it was next April or something like that. And so I'm forcing myself to get to a place where I think I'm adding value to other people. And not only that, to create these connections that are good, not only for them, but for me too. I benefit as much as anybody from messages in the books and also in public speaking. So it's a win-win when we treat ourselves as a community. Emily Esfahani Smith, she talked about belonging being one of the pillars. And that's one of the easiest ones, I think. And I think you're right. A lot of people who retire become really comfortable being alone. And I think that is wonderful. However,
However,
we
right.
also need to kind of step back from that comfort and continue these engaging relationships with people. And they could be family, they could be grandchildren, children, friends, or really get out of our comfort zone and, find ways that we can join something at the Parks and Recreation, a walking class, a step class, an art class. And there are free ones everywhere. So if you can pay for a high-end art class, that's great. And if you don't want to, I'm sure at the rec center you can find something almost for nothing. Or if you have something that you love, why not you build your own little tight-knit community of just find other people in your community who like the same thing and say, hey, let's get together once a month, whatever it is. So I think it's important to enjoy being alone, but don't start to get too comfortable in that, so we forget that we need community for, I think, our balance in our life.
Right. And that's why I started that boomer banter, because during COVID, it was a way for us to connect virtually, and now it has become a community. And I think, even a virtual community is impactful and important for our health.
Absolutely.
I wanted to talk to you about purpose. So if I was to ask you, what is your purpose, Erik, would you be able to describe that?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is kind of in my it's not really written anywhere. It might be scribbled down on some notes somewhere, but it's basically to leave a wake of positivity behind me, to improve people's lives and leave a wake of positivity behind me. So that's my goal, is to create connections that are, again, good for me and good for other people. But I want that wake not to just be me and the one person or the small 4 people I'm getting together with. I want it to be a wake that spreads out and affects more and more and more people, so that positivity can spread. And the more of us creating those wakes, the more positivity there is touching all of us. I lived in Paris when I was 23 years old. I was asked to write a small chapter for a book a man was editing, and he lived in Rambouillet, just outside of Paris, and I was living in Paris. And I would go out to his farm. Basically, he wasn't a farmer, but he lived on an old farm, and we would have these great 4 to 6 hour dinners every Sunday, and he would invite poets and philosophers, and it was him, his wife, his children, and usually his children would bring 1 or 2 people, and then he would have a poet or a philosopher or something, or professor or something, and he invited me. I got to go every Sunday, and it was just wonderful. And then one day I kind of asked him, as we were walking, we always took a long walk after dinner, and he lived near the woods, and I said, I love being here. Why do I get to come every week? Because he'd invite different people, like one and done type thing, or maybe so often. And he said, my goal is to create little intellectual snowballs. And as that snowball gets bigger, it's going to create its own snowballs. And in the end, you've got an avalanche of intellectualism running down the mountain. And I was really honored that I think he was indirectly saying he wants me to be a snowball.
Yeah. Awesome.
And so I kind of live by that.
So, I was having a conversation the other night with a friend who was talking about finding purpose, right? And so many of us think purpose is like this big capital P purpose, solving world hunger, and then they stop, and they don't know how to find a purpose. Do you have any tools or suggestions that you give to people to help figure out what their purpose might be?
Yeah. I think my definition of purpose, and I'm kind of stealing this from Emily Esfahani Smith, is it's just something bigger than yourself. And so creating 1,000 wells in rural Africa, that's a purpose that's way bigger than yourself. Having a coffee with a friend who might be or might not be lonely, that's a purpose. You're touching something bigger than yourself. So that's kind of my definition of it. And I like to be very intentional about things. And this helps me remember that purpose is at the forefront of what I'm doing. So if I get a call that say from a high school friend I haven't seen in 10 years, hey, Erik, I'm going to be in LA on a 6-hour layover. Can we meet for coffee? Absolutely. I can't wait to meet you for coffee. What I do is I say to myself, what do I want that conversation to be like? Who is this person? What might they need? What do I want? What could I learn from them? And I will actually write out what I think what a great conversation would be. Just notes. Of course, I'm not writing long things, but I would take bullet point notes of what do I want that, say we're going to meet for coffee for 2 hours. What do I want that to be like? And so that makes that a more purposeful conversation. So it's not like we meet for 2 hours, we talk about this and that, and talk about a little bit of football. We talk about catch up our kids a little bit. And then as soon as they leave, I'm like, oh my gosh, why didn't I mention this whole thing that they're working on that I didn't even bring up? And so I want to be really intentional about that. And also, I think knowing what we are interested in and setting goals. So you mentioned I climb mountains. I have a list of the mountains I'd like to climb, and I only focus on the next one, and I have a big goal. And so that's my purpose in this realm, right? To climb. Next one for me is going to be Denali in Alaska. And there's no guarantees I'll make the summit, but there's a guarantee I'm going to start on May 13th next year. And so I have a hard time exercising every day, not when I'm
Mhm.
climbing a mountain. If I know that on May 13th, I'm going to be at the bottom of a really tall mountain with a big backpack and pulling a sled, I need to be in shape. So I exercise every single day. And the purpose is so I can climb that mountain. The benefit is that I'm more healthy and I can maybe live longer and I can do things that I enjoy doing. But if I don't have that mountain goal, the purpose gets lost and I might miss a day and then maybe 2 days and my exercise falls off. And so that's one thing, is set these pretty big goals and then that remind yourself of why you're doing it. Helps you remember why these little things. And I think that helps. And also just big level purpose. What could I do that's bigger than myself? Asking
Yeah.
yourself that question. And it could be something tiny, it could be something huge.
Yeah, yeah. I find that, just even thinking about the show, the Hey Boomer show, gives me such an enormous sense of purpose, to help and inspire and encourage and let people know that you're never too old.
Nope.
It definitely keeps you focused on, what you're doing and what you're producing. And also, the book that actually got me to talk to Erik in the
Mhm.
first place was called The Successful Mind, which is a compilation, right? A
Yes.
compilation of authors. And before you talk about that, I was really touched by this one by Nate Johnson, where he talks about perception. What you see
hmm
is your reality, and it can keep you stuck. And he tells the story about the hammer syndrome. Do you remember that?
I don't remember directly, but I remember loving his chapter.
His chapter was great. And he says, if all you do is see yourself as a hammer,
Uh-huh.
then all you see are nails.
hmm
Right. And so if you start to see yourself as bigger than a hammer, maybe you're a whole toolbox,
Yeah.
right? Then you start to see so many more possibilities and opportunities. And I think perception of what we see is so important,
I
you know?
agree 100%. And I do think that we really create our meaning. And that book actually it was an accident too. I'm going to give you a quick backstory of that. I told you in COVID-19, speaking dried up. So I published my second book, which is almost done. Then I thought books can work, but it'll take me 2 years to write another good book. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to take my idea and I'm going to get people who know more than I do about certain ideas. And I gathered these wonderful people to all the 33 authors in that, everybody from a medical doctor, a psychologist, a pastoral counselor, a firewalking instructor from India, a yoga instructor, all of these wonderful people from different fields to give their idea, what is the secret to purpose, productivity, and happiness. And the synergy working with the authors was just magical. And like you mentioned Nate's chapter, that little gem of, if we see ourselves as a hammer, all we see is nails. If we see each other as somebody who's influencing people's lives, we see lives to influence all over the place. It's wonderful. And so it's been really, really great. And I really love working with the authors to make an impact on the world.
Yeah. And you've done 2 more books in that series, right?
Yeah, The Successful Body, using fitness, nutrition, and mindset to live better. And then The Successful Spirit, which is what separates somebody who goes to the Olympics versus somebody who's equally strong and equally hardworking who doesn't, or somebody who sells a company for $100 million versus another entrepreneur who's equally smart and hardworking. And so I tried to get really exceptional people, somebody who's climbed all of the 7 summits, the highest mountain of every continent, American Ninja Warriors, Olympic medal winners. Actually, 3 of the authors in there, they wrote the chapter months before the Tokyo Olympics, and 3 of them and 2 of them won medals. And so that was
Cool.
pretty exciting. And then
Yeah.
also we have entrepreneurs who've done really amazing things. And that kind of shifted my focus a little bit in the books to productivity based on the reader feedback. They were really excited about 2 things: mindset and how that affects productivity. And I think for a retiree, that's it. It's our
Mm,
mindset, how
mm,
we look at our reality in front of us. And we're going to create exactly the reality that we're picturing. If I'm ready to retire and I'm picturing sitting on a beach for hours on end every single day, that is more likely going to happen than I picture myself creating a podcast and writing a book. And you know what? One might be right for one person and one might be right for the other person. From my humble experience as a 54-year-old person, I think choosing things that really get us to communicate our passions to other people, and be willing to learn from other people, those are for me two key ingredients to, I think, feeling rejuvenated, feeling excited about waking up every day and getting to whatever my goals are.
Yeah, I agree. You hear a lot of people, and once we're over 65, you hear a lot of people saying, oh, aging's not for sissies, and oh, this hurts and that hurts, and all of that. But I think instead of looking at it that way, if we start looking at, well, what's possible? Yeah, okay, so I'm a little stiffer. So, but that doesn't mean I can't still go walk a trail, and, maybe I'm not going to climb to the top of the mountain, but
Right.
so I think it's really about being able to change our perceptions of what's possible and seeing possibilities as opposed to limitations and challenges.
Absolutely. My grandfather, who lived to, I think it was 96, I know it was past 95, I think it was 96 or 98. He walked around the block of his house, and around the block was 1 mile. And so and multiple times near the end, people would stop and ask if he needed help, because that walk would sometimes take him 2.5 hours. But he walked all the way around the block, which was 1 mile, all the way up into his very late 90s. That was his big goal. And every time I'd see him, I'd go on Sundays often, he would talk about his walk, because that was one of the things that gave him excitement every single day.
Right.
Knowing, oh my gosh, I'm going to do this big giant thing. And for him, that walk was a big deal.
Right. Right. And I talk to my mom every day. She's 93, and she and her husband go to the gym almost every day. And
That's wonderful.
They do aerobics. He lifts weights. So yeah, you can still do it. That's what's so cool about it. But I have a question for you. I mean, you mentioned earlier that you're a very optimistic person.
Mm-hmm.
And I see myself as an optimistic person. And yet life happens, right? There are times when that optimism, or our outlook of optimism, gets smacked down.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do when that happens?
One is I do rely on my community. For private life, my wife, we have a great communicative relationship. My children, I get a real joy of, knowing that they're part of my inner circle. And then for work, I have, accountability partners that I work with, that I meet with from time to time. And I think so basically inserting myself into my different communities is one of the biggest ways.
Yeah, because I think that can be a time when we might feel like isolating. We don't want to burden anybody with our problems, and but you're saying reaching out and telling people, I need your support right now.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, I think part of my positivity, my sister, brother, and we grew up, like I said, in Tacoma, loving parents, but, not a lot of resources, and really average, family, and so, but and there were arguments, fights. It was, you would call it a dysfunctional family for sure. And then, so in our 20s, my brother and sister and my brother he went to Stanford and Harvard for his MBA, doing well. My sister is doing well. And we said, why did we turn out okay? And we boiled it down to, one is, no matter how chaotic things could have been in the household, my father was drinking too, and that was part of it. No matter how chaotic things were in the household, my parents, neither of them ever said anything really negative about us, and they never showed that they didn't love us. That was one. And then a little bit later, I think I've picked up on something else even. And my mom, she was at a company called Home Interiors, which is a wonderful company in sales with this wonderful woman owner named Mary Crowley. And Zig Ziglar was a big part of their process, in the sales process. So my mom used to listen to these little cassette tapes from Zig Ziglar in the late 70s and 80s, early 80s. And I didn't think anything of it. And now, as I'm getting into personal development, I realize, boom. Oh my gosh. Me as a 9-year-old hearing these cassette tapes over and over made a big impact, and I didn't even know it.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. And I think that makes a good point,
Mhm.
that we as grandparents, the things that we might say to our grandchildren, our children too, but our grandchildren are looking up to us for encouragement and wisdom and love and all of those things. So that kind of brings me back around to mindset.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm wondering if you have some favorite anecdotes or things to say about, how do you maintain the mindset that keeps you positive and productive?
Well, one kind of funny one that just comes to mind as you're saying that is when we're in the mountains, we don't climb mountains because it's super fun. We climb it because it's miserable. And
Oh, great.
but we finish anyway. And so kind of one of the funny things we do to put it in perspective is say we're snowed in our tent, and there's no sign of it letting up anytime soon, and it's negative, 10 degrees or even negative 20. So one of us will say, it's negative 20 degrees, but at least the wind is blowing at 60 miles an hour, or you're climbing up the hill and you're like, oh my gosh, we better rope up, because if we fall, we're gonna, there's a long drop. And then it'll say, at least above us there's a big cornice that might break off at any moment. So whenever we say something, we say but at least, and we say something even worse. And with life, it's kind of funny because that's creeped in a little bit, where on the mountain, this is Aconcagua. So that's making light of it. Basically, when something bad happens, try and figure out something worse and
Mm,
say, there's this, but at least there's this. And it's something that's even worse. And it
right.
creates a chuckle. But also, I think becoming into the habit of gratitude. I think gratitude is
Mhm.
the number one thing that keeps a mindset in the right direction, to keeps a
Mhm.
mindset true. And when I was climbing Aconcagua, the highest mountain in South America, it's actually the highest outside of the Himalaya, almost 23,000 feet. I'm climbing up, and all of a sudden it was sprinkling and dreary, and the sun broke out a tiny bit. And I just said, thank God for this moment. And then a little bit later, I was really struggling. We were on a acclimatization climb up a neighboring mountain, and I was really struggling. And I just said, "Thank God for this moment." That kind of surprised me. And then I'm really struggling, and I said, "Thank God for this moment." And then there's a thing called I don't know. It's going to the bathroom number 2 in the mountains is a big deal. So it takes 15 minutes to quit.
No, 20 degrees below zero.
Yeah, yeah. It takes 15 minutes because the altitude, you can't move fast or you're going to really exhaust yourself. 15 minutes to put on your boots and enough clothes just to walk 100 yards to get to this tent that is designated for this purpose. And it's basically a tent with a hole cut out in the bottom, and you're supposed to go on a newspaper, and everything should go well. But when you've got 100 climbers trying to, actually about 15 for this particular tent, it's a miserable place is what I'm trying to say. And people's stomachs are generally not right at all. So you enter this miserable place. And as I'm in this miserable place, all of a sudden I said, thank God for this moment.
Oh
And Wendy,
gosh.
it really surprised me because it was a horrible moment. I was altitude sick. I wasn't feeling good. I'm in this horrible tent. And I said, thank God for this moment. And all of a sudden I felt so wonderful. And so when I got back from the mountain, I'd be sitting in my chair and I'd say, thank God for this chair. And so just getting to the habit of that. And whenever I said that, no matter what I was doing, good or bad, it really made the moment feel great. And it would put whatever bad situation I was in into perspective. And Wendy, I'm not talking about just, kind of bad situations. My biggest test was when my dad died. One of my biggest things is happiness is a choice. It's like a backpack. We either put it on or we don't, and it's our choice.
Mhm.
And I do this along with the idea of success is a path that we're either following or not. And it doesn't matter where on the path. You could be a business owner with $100 million company, and that's successful. You could be an entrepreneur starting out with a bunch of debt and a great idea. And if you're excited to get out of bed every day, you're on the same path of success.
Mhm.
And neither is better than the other. Happiness, back to the backpack idea. I think that happiness is a choice at any moment. When my dad died, it was an untimely death. And I got a call when I was at work, and I literally hung up the phone with my sister who told me, and I asked myself, how am I going to handle this? And I had just spoken about this happiness idea to a company. And I said, am I going to put on the backpack right now? And I literally decided how I was going to handle this. I could have been mad at the universe, mad at God, mad at the doctors. But instead, walked out of my office. I told some people in cubicles in front of the office I'm going home because my dad died. Went back, and as I was driving home, which is only about a 6-minute, 8-minute drive, what am I going to do? How am I going to respond? And I learned an ethic of hard work from my dad. And so before I even changed my clothes, I walked into the garage, got the lawnmower out, and started mowing the lawn. And that's how I celebrated my dad. And I was, of course, choked up. I was dealing with pain, but I chose to celebrate his life and do something that he taught me, which is work hard.
Do something that he would have.
And so even in one of my hardest moments, I still live by that philosophy. That backpack is available to us anytime, no matter how good or bad.
Yeah. And it's not always easy.
No, it's not. It shouldn't be.
Choose to be happy when things seem dark. And it's not always easy to shift your mindset to say, thank God for this moment. You know, I'm sure you didn't say thank God for this moment at that point, but but you were able to recognize what he taught you and gave you,
right,
and honor him that way. Yeah, that's really a beautiful idea. I like that.
Yeah, so I do think that, just kind of going back to it, having a mindset of gratitude is, I think, one of the easiest ways to live a more happy life.
Yeah, I think you're right, Erik. Thank you for that wisdom. So Florian says, thank you for sharing that precious memory. So if you could give 2 or 3 takeaways, thinking about the boomer generation and beyond, you know, because like I said, my mother is 93 and she listens. What would you say would be the 3 most important things to think about when you think about purpose, meaning, and belonging?
Okay. One is, I think, putting other people first. That's my number one thing. Zig Ziglar from the old tapes, and I actually know this now because I've reread all his books as an adult after I figured it out. He said you can have anything in your life that you want as long as you help enough other people get what they want. And I do believe in that ethic of, if you're giving things away, if you're helping other people, it comes back, and you don't do it because it comes back, but it does. So one is to give as much as you of yourself away to other people, help enough other people. 2 is to be grateful for everything that you can possibly think of. And then I think the third one would be to really decide intentionally what you want your purpose to be, and set a goal, and set, I think, a big goal. Write a book. I think, as I was just pondering, what is one easy thing that many people who are either retired or approaching retirement could do to inject meaning and therefore happiness in their life, is write their book. Whether this book turns into a New York Times bestseller, whether it turns into a book that's on Amazon, or whether it turns into a manuscript that you and a few friends read, that's writing. That writing process really has been a self-actualization process for me, unbelievably. And a lot of the authors I work with now, they didn't know what writing would do for them. So I encourage anybody to and you don't have to plan on a whole book. Just start writing whatever you feel like writing about, whether that's your narrative, whether that's your story, the story of your life, or whether it's an idea that you have. Don't worry about it being a good book. Just think of it of one paragraph that's going to turn into a section, that's going to turn into a chapter, that's going to turn into a book, and just start writing it. That's one of the things. That's like a big goal that could be exciting to wake up every day and chip away at that. So gratitude, giving yourself away to others, and really narrowing down your purpose. Maybe it's not writing a book. Maybe it's exercise related. Maybe it's helping, somebody again, which is kind of like number 1. But those are the 3 things.
But that's a purpose too, to help somebody.
And also, I mentioned to you earlier today, I just got back from a canoe camping trip I was invited by the Air Force, a friend who's in the Air Force, and it was an Air Force outdoor recreation event for 3 days. And a few of the people on that trip are really close to retirement, and they're in their 50s. And so when they start to consider retirement, they've got a really lot of time ahead of them. And as I was talking to them about retirement, these different people on the canoe trip, one of them actually mentioned how many times he has seen somebody retire in their mid or late 50s, because they got full pension. They're set pretty much. They can go back to work if they want to, but they don't have to.
Right.
He did say the people who don't have a plan, sadly, often die quickly. They're in their late 50s and they retire, and they somehow, their identity, their purpose is gone, and they don't do well, or they actually die. Whereas the other ones in their late 50s are already excited about figuring out which community college they're going to teach at, or what adventure trips are they going to do, where are they going to volunteer. Those ones absolutely thrive. And so it's just
Absolutely.
a matter of deciding, because you don't have to be 57 to have a lot of retirement left. You could be 75 at this point and have a long plan for a long span of exciting things to do in retirement. And so it was really eye-opening to hear them talk about that retirement so close to their futures. Like, one of them will retire this year, and he's in his mid 50s.
Well, and as you told that story, that's what happened with my husband. He was a government employee, and when he retired at 65, he completely lost his identity.
Mm-hmm.
He thought, oh, he's just going to hunt and fish all day long.
Right.
And within like a year and a half, he had died.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think you have to have some kind of meaning and purpose, and, who are you now? Who are you going to be? Yeah.
Right. And choose to be extraordinary. That's the whole, my book is Ordinary to Extraordinary. There's nothing extraordinary about me. However, I chose to do extraordinary things. And so if I'm nearing retirement or retired, choose to do extraordinary things. Choose to be the person at a group of 10 people at the coffee shop that people want to know more from, because you've just done something exciting, or you're planning something exciting even.
Yeah. So let me tell people how they can reach out to you. You can email Erik at Erik, which is ERIK, at Erik Seversen, SEVERSEN, erikseversen.com. And that is also his website, erikseversen.com. And you can also find him on LinkedIn. So thank you so much for what you shared with us today, Erik.
Thank you, Wendy, for having me on. Like I said, I absolutely love what you're doing. So it was a joy to be here.
Thank you. Before I let you go, I just want to say thank you for the comments that have come in today. I love seeing your comments when you're listening live. I also love to see your comments when you listen to the podcast. So please don't be shy. Let me know what you think about what we're offering here. And don't miss the opportunity to join the Second Boomer Banter, which will kick off on October 17th at 12 noon Eastern Time. And you can sign up to be a member of that by going to buymeacoffee.com/heyboomer0413, which is when the first show was. Next week, my guest is a man named Doug McIntyre. And we're going to be talking about Doug's first novel, which is called Frank's Shadow. I loved this book. And it's a story that touches family relationships on many levels. And it takes the main character on a journey to live about his father's history while battling his own demons. Doug is a longtime columnist for the Southern California News Group, and has been on radio and has written for TV, including Married with Children, WKRP in Cincinnati, many, many other things. So that should be a fun conversation. Really an interesting book. So I think we'll dig into some cool stuff there. And I like to leave you with the belief that we can all live with curiosity, live with relevance, and live with courage. And remember that you are never too old to set another goal or dream a new dream. My name is Wendy Green, and this has been Hey Boomer.